Kwe Nindaliwisi Sabre, Akdalewe Paganjik. Hi everyone, my name is Sabre Pictou Lee and I'm Mi'kmaq from Eel River Bar First Nation in northern New Brunswick, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Archipel Research and Consulting. Archipel is an Indigenous-owned and women-led research and consulting firm. We specialize in Indigenous-related research and equity, diversity, and inclusion, and our focal point is really building bridges between worldviews, building bridges between worlds of knowledge.
I'm Meredith Preston McGhie. I'm the Secretary General for the Global Centre for Pluralism. As an organization, we've been thinking a lot about how we can be contributing to reconciliation here in Canada. And like many organizations, one of the things that we began with was a process of developing land acknowledgements when we have events in the building. We needed to understand better the history of this land, not just the history of this building from a colonial perspective, but really much more deeply, the history of dispossession on this land and the difficult history that this brings forward and how we actually lean into understanding that and bringing that into both the land acknowledgements, but also into all of our work at the Centre.
We were all really profoundly moved at the idea of having an opportunity to retell a history of the capital city, of the national capital and here in Ottawa, from an Indigenous perspective and rewriting this historical narrative that has predominantly been a settler narrative.
Pluralism at its heart is respect for diversity, the conscious choices and actions that we take in order to foster belonging and to positively respond to differences as a strength in our societies rather than something that is threatening or something we need to manage or overcome. When we think about reconciliation, it really connects us to a lot of the core questions that we ask when we think about pluralism. We ask questions about marginalization, about exclusion, about power imbalances. We try to lean into difficult conversations about our own history, our historical narratives, what we haven't been telling in our historical narratives, and we try to weave all of that together in a way that is more transformative. We try to go beyond this idea of including a few marginalized groups into the current status quo, but rather to recreate and reimagine society in a way that is collective, that we can go forward together.
Here in Ottawa, we're on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. And the Kichi Sibi, or the Ottawa River, and therefore Ottawa itself, was really a place of gathering, where nations gathered, where the Algonquin Anishinaabe cared for the land, and it was a very extensive trade route where Indigenous and settler relations were fundamentally built in many ways. And so having an opportunity to actually tell that through a community lens, through an archival lens, through historical research and storytelling, which we partook in through involving Algonquin elders such as Albert Dumont, as well as Algonquin researchers, other Indigenous researchers, and settler historical researchers to comprise this report, which I think is very profound.
One of the pieces that I think is really stark in the report is, of course, that the mortar in the building has been drawn from quarries that were on traditional Algonquin burial grounds. So we see that there are likely remains within the very walls of our building.
This report helps bring this to the forefront from a settler lens. And now that it's been shared, we have a responsibility to carry that forward, and we have a responsibility to make amends.
You can be in healthcare, you can be in education, you can be so many different things and take steps towards reconciliation in your own way. Part of that is education of yourselves and your staff and your colleagues about this history, and part of that is reaching out to the wider community here, the Algonquin leadership, of course, but also to non-Indigenous communities in Ottawa to make sure that we're all collectively owning and understanding that we need to be part of this reconciliation.
Relationship building has to be very intentional and needs to be recognized that it's a slow process that reckons many, many histories, such as residential schools, for one. I encourage institutions to really take a step back and be introspective in this and realize that their responsibility is to learn everything they can learn about their buildings, about their place, and understanding where you stand is very critical first step in doing that. And once you have a strong foundation of the history of your organization, of the history of the building that you belong in, there are mechanisms to build relationships from there. But the worst thing is to arrive at a table having no knowledge of what's transpired.